and welcome back for the third of our Poetry Corner sessions. We're looking today at a poem by a different poet, George Herbert. He was a 17th century priest and poet and writer who left us a wonderful treasure trove of reflective poems on life and especially Christian life, many of which have since been turned into hymns. The poem we're looking at today hasn't, partly I suspect because it's very short, and it's a little bit obscure. It will take a moment of explaining, I think, but once you've clicked what it's about, it's an easy poem to understand and a very easy one to remember. It was the first George Herbert poem I ever memorised, and if you're into memorising poetry, this might be a fun one to start with. As before, I'm going to recite the poem and then try and explain the poem and then apply some of the lessons it might have for us today. So let's hear George Herbert's poem, Hope. Hope, by George Herbert. I gave to Hope a watch of mine, but he an anchor sent to me. Then an old prayer book I did present, but he an optic sent. With that I sent a vial full of tears, but he a few green ears. Ah, trifler, I'll no more I'll bring. I did expect a ring. Well, as promised, a very short poem today, as you heard. I do like this little poem. It takes a moment of thinking to get to what it's about. The poem describes an exchange of gifts between the narrator and somebody he just calls Hope, and that's Hope with a capital H, of which more in a moment. The exchange of gifts was quite a common practice in Herbert's day, a way of expressing and articulating a relationship, and all the gifts that are exchanged are symbolic. So first of all, the narrator gives to Hope a watch, and the sense here, I think, is look at the time that's passed. When's my hope going to come true? When am I going to get what I've been hoping for? And Hope responds by giving the gift of an anchor. An anchor, of course, anchors a ship in place. It holds it steady. It's a solid thing that you hold on to. And the message seems to be, hold on, stay solid, it'll come. But the poet is impatient. And so then an old prayer book I did present. A prayer book, of course, is a record of prayers. And so he sends this prayer book to Hope saying, look at all the times I've prayed for this. Look at all the times I've asked for this. And Hope responds with the present of an optic. That's the word at the time for a telescope, with which you see things that are far away. So now the message from Hope is, it's far off, but look, you can just about see it. The poet still isn't getting it, or still isn't happy, so with that I sent a vial, a little bottle, full of tears. Look at how I've wept for this. Look at how I want it. Look at how much I've desired it. And Hope sends back a few green ears. That's an image from harvest time, when the first grain to emerge would still be green on the ear. When the first green ears appeared, they were the first fruits of the harvest, the sign that the harvest was about to come. And the poet, the narrator, is frustrated that he hasn't got what he's been hoping for yet, and gives up. Trifler, I'll no more I'll bring. I did expect a ring being the way that a relationship was sealed, something that remains for us in the marriage, traditions around marriage. So the poet in this poem is impatiently looking for the thing he's hoped for, impatiently looking for an answer to his hopes and prayers. And Hope keeps telling him, be patient, it's almost there. Well, first of all, in fact, he tells him, be patient, hold on. Here's an anchor you can hold on to and trust in. Then he tells him, look, it's far off, but you can see it. Then the green ears, it's almost here. But the poet either doesn't realise his hope is almost fulfilled or doesn't care and walks away, never having got the thing he hoped for. He gives up just at the moment when the first green ears of the harvest are appearing, when his hope is about to come true, he lets go the anchor and he walks away. The poem, of course, is a glimpse of what human nature is so often like. We are impatient creatures, and too often we walk away from something that we could have had or achieved because we just can't be bothered to wait any longer for it. Particularly evident often in the young, but you see it in all ages at some point or other. We're not very good at sticking things out. We're not very good at hope deferred. Proverbs says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life." And this poem is about a hope that is long deferred, but is about to come true. Over the course of the poem, hope comes closer and closer, and if the poet had only waited another line or two, he'd have got it. Hope would have come true. But he walked away. He couldn't wait one more line. It's a tragedy we see played out in human relationships time and again, but it's also a tragedy we see played out in our relationships with God. Hope in the poem has a capital letter because I think Herbert is talking about God, the one in whom he hopes, the one in whom he puts his trust. And he's saying that the things he's hoped that God would give him don't seem to have arrived yet. And so he comes to God saying, "Where are they? It's been a long time. I gave a watch. I've asked for them a lot. A prayer book. I really want them. A vial full of tears." And God says to him, "Hold on and trust me." An anchor. They're still far off, but look, you can almost see your hope coming true. An optic. The first fruits are already arriving. A few green ears. And the tragedy is that the poet walks away and gives up on God because he hasn't got what he asked for yet, when his hopes were about to come true. So often I think we become frustrated or disillusioned in the Christian life because we feel that God hasn't given us what we felt he'd promised, that he hasn't answered our prayers or fulfilled all our hopes for the Christian life. And the truth is, a lot of the time, the problem is that we've been impatient. God promises many wonderful things to the believer, but not all at once. Not that we'll get all we want tomorrow. He's not Santa Claus. He's much better than that. Many of the things God promises are not for this life, but for the next. His promises of peace, wholeness, health, happiness. Those things are not promised to us now, they're promised to us in the life to come, although we may well get glimpses of them now. Too many Christians have tripped themselves up by trying to claim those promises in the present and then thinking that something has gone wrong when their life isn't perfect. That's not the promise God makes. The promise is that he will walk with us through the troubles of this life and set us firmly in the good and the glory of the next. But even in the things of this life, the things we pray for, often we're in too much of a hurry to see fruit. When I was training as a minister, one piece of advice I was given by a wise older minister is most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year, and they underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. He was speaking there especially of ministers, and the way in which he felt young ministers especially would come to a church thinking they could revolutionise it in a year, and then leave disappointed and disillusioned after 5 years, because it didn't seem to have changed. When if they'd only stuck it out and committed, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they could have really have turned things upside down. I know I benefited growing up from 2 ministers in particular, who both gave periods of 15, 20 years to the church they committed to. And over the course of that time, the church was transformed. Most of it didn't happen until about 10 years in. Patience and perseverance can bring big changes in this life. So what is it that we're hoping in God for at the moment? what is it that we're waiting on him for, yearning for, praying for, weeping for? We may feel that the time is passing fast and it hasn't arrived, but God works on his own timetable. It may very well be that the thing we're yearning for is just round the corner, and we can't see it without an optic, a telescope. We haven't noticed the green ears, the first fruits that are already springing up. To us, the challenge that I think God is giving us through this poem of Herbert's is trust, hope. Hold on to the anchor. Don't give up. The answer to our hopes may be just around the corner. Don't run away in a hurry because it hasn't been delivered in our time. God works to his own timetable. As the old hymn says, judge not the Lord by feeble sense, but trust him for his grace. Behind a frowning providence he hides a smiling face. Blind unbelief is sure to err and scan his works in vain. He is his own interpreter, and he will make it plain. I sent to hope a watch of mine, but he an anchor sent to me. Then an old prayer book I did present, but he an optic sent. With that I gave a vial full of tears, but he a few green ears. Ah, trifler, I'll no more, no more I'll bring. I did expect a ring. I hope we can have the wisdom and the patience and the perseverance to hold on to the anchor, and to wait for our hopes to come true. Amen.